We have 12 people from the NTSB on scene, specialists in track and engineering, operations, mechanical, emergency procedures, or emergency response rather, railway signals, and hazardous materials. Let me describe briefly the train involved was made up in Chicago. One crew took it to Fort Wayne, another crew took it to Bellevue, Ohio. This particular crew got on board at 7:55 p.m. in Bellevue and was on duty for approximately 7 hours. The call came into the fire department at 2:05 a.m. on a 911 call. The fire department's immediate response was to begin to set up large caliber hoses. Then they experienced an explosion, decided to back off, and call for the evacuation. Once they found out what was burning, they decided to let it burn, but contain the fire. So they set up a command post and the perimeter. So the train had 97 loads on it and one empty car. It was 12,319 tons dead weight and was a little over a mile long at 5,730 feet. It was mixed freight. The crew was southbound. The train was southbound, coming up on the curve. The crew had a clear signal. They saw nothing of anything unusual on the track ahead. They derailed, and when they derailed, they had 3 ethanol cars, 2 corn syrup cars, 8 wheat cars, and 4 cars of malt. As they came up into the curve was a 25-mile-an-hour curve. They were dynamically braking coming into the curve. They were approximately at the speed limit as they came into the curve. Shortly after entering the curve, they got an undesirable braking, which means that the air supply broke basically because of the cars derailing. That occurred they were at 23 miles per hour at that point. It took them 20 seconds for this emergency stop, during which they went about 372 feet. The curve was a fairly aggressive curve, and hence the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. The track had been inspected with ultrasonic and induction testing in April 5th. This is done 3 times a year. The track was also inspected visually with an inspector driving the track. This is done twice a week, and it was done on Monday, on July 9th. The intent of the investigation, the investigators will look at will walk the final quarter mile of track to do a visual inspection themselves. The train, just prior to coming into the curve, about 2.2 miles before the curve, passed a hot box detector, which is an automatic way to look for hot wheels, dragging brakes, and hot bearings. The activity going on tonight, they're currently re-railing the cars that can be re-railed. Those then are pulled away from the site. The intent is to cool the ethanol cars down, get the fire to put out, then foam it so that the cars, so that the fire cannot be reignited. The activity continuing on tonight and tomorrow will be to reconstruct the rails to understand whatever can be done, whatever can be detected from that reconstruction. And as they pull the cars and wreckage apart, looking for anything that's out of that's an anomaly. We've got, as I said, we've got 12 people on scene, and we'll probably stay on scene for a week to 10 days. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Are you saying then, the name for Jim Woods of the Columbus Dispatch, are you saying then that speed was not a factor? You're really looking at the rail more?
Well, in an investigation of this sort, we try to look at everything. But at this point, the speed was where it was supposed to be coming into the curve. And there were no apparent anomalies that the crew noticed coming up on that curve.
When you say no apparent anomalies, you're talking about the track itself.
They saw nothing wrong with the track, and they had a clear signal. They were authorized to proceed on that track.
And you were saying too that there had been an inspection in April, and then you were talking about one just this last week.
Yeah, there's 3 times a year. There's a very thorough ultrasonic and induction test of the rail, and so that's looking for any potential anomalies in the rail. But then on a twice weekly basis, the track is inspected by driving along it, just to make sure that everything looks all right.
Okay.
Yes.
Jason Fraser, 10 TV. So at this point, what do you think caused the trains to derail? Do you think that it was a mechanical issue? Do you think that someone may have put something on the track to force it to derail?
Well, that's exactly what the investigation is aimed at finding out. But at this point, we're just beginning the fact-finding phase, and so we're just gathering information. Very briefly, an investigation of this sort can take a year to 18 months before we come to a probable cause and recommendations. So we have a week to 10 days on scene, then we have months of additional fact gathering, followed by analysis of all of those facts. And that's where we come up with findings, conclusions, and a probable cause. So it's too early to tell. As I say, we're still gathering all the facts.
Can you rule out sabotage?
At this point in time, it's too early to rule anything out. But that's basically how we do an investigation. We look at everything and then rule things out as we go along.
You said the crew had 7 hours, had gotten on board 7 hours before the derailment. How much time is it required for them to get rest before a trip like this, and did they get adequate sleep?
7 hours is certainly within the duty time limitations, but we will be developing what we call a 72-hour history so we can understand how the crew may have been resting beforehand.
What's the history of the engineer? I mean, have either of them ever been in an accident like this before?
We have no information at this point in time on the history of the crew.
Are you releasing the names of the crew?
We won't release the names of the crew. That would have to be released by the rail company.
Have you ruled anything out as far as a cause?
No, we've been basically on scene. Our investigator in charge arrived late this afternoon. We arrived mid-afternoon, so it's really very early in the investigation.
But when you talked about the speed, is that because there's some sort of black box?
There's an event recorder on the locomotives, and that event recorder then allows us, well, in this case, we have the event recorders. We also have video recorders because there was forward-facing video on the locomotives. Those recorders were initially read out so that we had the initial speed and times, but the recorders are going to Washington, D.C., back to our laboratories for further analysis.
Like you said, they were going 23 into that curve.
They were going 23 at the time the emergency braking was initiated.
Do you know how long it will take before some of the business owners will be able to return back, and some of the people who were previously evacuated from the area?
The evacuation is under the control of the fire department. Our understanding is at the moment the evacuation is a voluntary evacuation of about a quarter mile. But those details would have to come from the fire department.
In terms of the length of the track is going to be shut down for, you're going to be here 7 days to 10 days. Is the track going to be shut down for the entirety of that length of time? Is it after you leave that the track is then repaired? Can you sort of walk us through how long is this track out of commission for?
Let me turn that question over to Sai Gura, who can give you a better understanding of that.
Pardon me?
Could you spell your name, please?
First name is Sai, C-Y, last name Gura, G-U-R-A. And basically, we're in the process already. As the cars are being re-railed, we're looking for evidence. We're going to forensically reconstruct the rail, and the same with the cars, and put them off to the side. Once they're off to the side, then they can start building the track. So I'll venture to guess the track will probably be built within a day or two.
And as a follow-up real fast, where are we exactly? I mean, I know you said they're still pulling the cars down. What kind of timeline are we working with that you think that you'll have this reconstructed? In terms of the timeline, you hope to have the cars reconstructed to have an idea, perhaps visually.
I would like to have that done in a couple, 3 days.
Okay.
So the track will be reopened in about 2-3 days.
Correct.
Yeah.
Let's take one more question.
I was just curious, was there any specific sound or anything that triggered the conductor to disconnect the locomotive? Was there anything that happened right before the derailment? You said they didn't notice anything abnormal about the tracks, but did they hear any sounds or anything?
We have no indication of that at this point in time. The emergency braking happens automatically once a car derails and the air coupling comes apart. Then the brakes go on automatically. So this was what's called an undesirable braking event, meaning that they didn't initiate it. The derailing initiated it.
Are you at all looking at any other area of tracks to make sure that no other tracks could possibly be coming apart just because of the significant amount of heat that we've had over the course of the last week and a half?
Our focus is on the track in question here. The railroad certainly has a responsibility for the track. With that, thank you very much.